Welcome into Inside Carolina's On the Beat Live, the original live Inside Carolina YouTube show slash podcast slash whatever you want to call it. I know there's a lot of people waiting at the gate. So as they open the cord, we'll let folks get in. Got Adam Smith, Ross Martin with me, Johnny T-shirt, JohnnyT-shirt.com. I have invited people. We'll see if they show up to answer the private chat. And I'm trying to figure out our logos. I don't usually use this. But anyway, Ross Martin, what you been up to the last few days, my friend?
Yeah, I mean, I hope I'd be, thought you'd be packing right now for the first round of the NCAA tournament. I mean, it's one of the best, it's one of the best times of the year. I think I had actually a buddy who listens to this podcast, Wayne House, who Adam knows.
The infamous.
He'll love a shout out. He's a huge Inside Carolina podcast fan. He told me we went to a workout on Monday morning. He said, man, this is usually one of the best weeks of the year. We're getting ready, we're filling out brackets. You're getting ready to watch games on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And it's just weird not having UNC in it. And then the weather's kind of cold. And so it was kind of like a weird time. But yeah, I mean, once UNC lost on Thursday, it was kind of just like, all right, we're off for a couple of days. There wasn't much going on Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday, and then kind of the coast to coast happened with y'all, and then Sherelle's scoop, and then the wheels started turning. And then two guys in the transfer portal last night while sitting at the bar at Top of the Hill for Hubert Davis's show. Justin McCoy entered. And then like 2 minutes later, Tyler Nickel, that was big news, entered. Meanwhile, Hubert Davis is talking. It was bizarre. I tweeted it out. I was sitting there trying to report on what Hubert was going to say about the NIT decision, reflections back on the 2022 season, 22-23 season. And then all of a sudden, like, these players start entering the portal. And so I had to put all these stories out. We had the stories ready. And we had the graphics ready. You kind of had to put them out, get them on Facebook, get them on Instagram, get them on Twitter, put on the boards, and then send a newsletter. So I was doing that for half of the show. And then, look, I mean, we're going to have some more news here at some point. I don't think we know when, but if you're an Inside Carolina subscriber, you're getting kept up to date with what Sherelle is hearing. I actually just got off the phone with him to make sure I was in the know as much as he can tell me on what's going on right now, what to expect over the next couple days and weeks. But yeah, I guess there's a lot of places to go, Tommy.
Yeah, I think one rule of thumb, Adam, in this, since you're the quote unquote newer guy of the bunch, is take your laptop everywhere. Yeah, you don't go to the restroom for too terribly long, and take your laptop when you go, because news could break at any time. News could break during this show. Who knows?
But Adam, waiting is the hardest part. Isn't that a song?
It is, actually. There's a bunch of songs that fit this season for North Carolina. We might have to go through them.
Since this is on the beat, I'll add to what Adam just said. When you know there's news happening and you're waiting for it to break, that is what sucks. I'd rather have it surprise me sometimes rather than knowing it's coming. I think recruiting people deal with this a lot, like Don and Sherelle. Like, it's going to break, but you can waste your whole day being ready. And so you take your laptop with you. You check your phone every 5 minutes. It happened last year too, it's the year before too, with all these decisions coming back. The waiting is the hardest part because we know there's more things to drop here, and you kind of just wait for it. So
every buzz of the phone. And if I may, real quick, Tommy, before you run the fast break, or I don't know, Carolina doesn't run the fast break anymore. Before you
walk secondary breaks either.
Before you walk it up and call a play and run 25 seconds off the shot clock, I would like to give Ross his flowers, because this guy, he's back from his hiatus from last week, which everyone needs a little break from time to time.
What is this hiatus you talk about?
You weren't on the show last week, were you?
Oh, that hiatus.
Yeah.
He
missed loose, Adam. I felt like last week, Ross, like you were not there, so Adam just cut loose. Adam was.
I mean, Ross is the alpha. You can't have two alphas.
You make it seem like I went on vacation or something. Yeah. All right. Sorry. Go ahead.
High there when you said, "What is this hiatus?" I'm trying to Praise
man,
you, buddy.
I know you're giving him flowers and he cuts you off.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm not-
It's
not a
the second
serious
time
thing, Ross.
you mentioned it, so I was like trying to figure out what the hiatus you're talking about.
I mean, well, you know what a hiatus is. I'm sorry. Never mind.
Go ahead.
I was going to say that this guy has been busting his hump the last couple of days. I mean, he's been really bringing it. He went to Hubert's final radio show, which I thought was a great idea. I mean, you know, that's one of the things they teach you way back. I know Ross always says he's self-taught in the journalism game. Being there is important. Even, we learned that a lot, when we started getting shut out of things during COVID. And he was there. And like he said, I mean, think about the surreal aspect of this all. I mean, if you're Ross, you got your notepad there. You're going to try to take some good notes here. This is the last we could hear from Hubert for 2 or 3 months. And, you've got the head honchos over there. Bubba's there. You got some of the heavy hitters there. Clint Gwaltney's probably giving you the evil eye, maybe. You never know with that guy sipping a Perrier probably. But, and then, Tyler Nichols in the transfer portal. While the dadgum head coach is talking about using the bench more. I mean, it's unbelievable, the timing of it. And, of course, Justin McCoy, too, which, you can't fault Justin McCoy. The guy wants to play. You can't fault Tyler Nichols. The guy wants to play. But, again, let me strike hiatus from the record. Court stenographer, we can take it off. And, I think Ross has been doing an amazing job getting all over the place. And there's a lot of things that you need to get ready and things to mentally prepare for. And, he's been busting it the last couple of days. So I just wanted to pick up him.
Yeah, I get what you meant with the hiatus now, with just missing last week's show. I need to go back and listen to now that I hear that Adam was loose. Story time with Greg.
Greg Barnes and I having a conversation. That's all.
And last night, you had Bubba there, Bubba's wife. You had Clint Gwaltney. You had Adam Lucas. You had Dwight Hollier, which is like the head of student mental health.
Yeah, right.
And you had the head of communications, athletic communications, Robbie Pickerel. So I kind of walked in with some of them too. It's kind of bizarre. And then Hubert walks into kind of an awkward, slow clap. It was kind of bizarre because, the season, it is one of the lowest points in Carolina basketball. Not the lowest, but one of the lowest. And Hubert walks in. There's a kind of a slow clap. But the people that are there, they're regulars. Like, it's this group of, let's say, older people that make this part of their week to go to these coaches shows, and they're great. I used to go to Larry Fedora and Mac Brown's show all the time, and then he starts the show. He was in a fine mood. Of course, everybody knows what's going on with the program, and it's not ideal. But Hubert carried himself fine. So yeah, Tom, you want to get into the NIT decision?
Yeah, let me ask you a question, though, first about how the show works, the radio show, the call-in show, whatever it is, because I see people on Inside Carolina give y'all grief, me if I'm around, for not asking the tough questions. And I'm always like, why don't you go to the radio show at Topo and blast off, ask whatever you want? But it's not like that anymore, is it, Ross? How do the questions come across to Hubert? In what format? I guess Jones gets them from Twitter, or they're vetted heavily, though, right?
They screen them, right? Is there a screening process?
Yeah, I think Jones puts out a tweet on the day of the show, and he gets tweets and emails from people. There is some. Look, Jones works for UNC, but he asks questions that are interesting sometimes. He asks about what things can they do to get better next year. Asks about the NIT, but obviously it's not like. It's like a New York Times here grilling the president about Middle East sanctions. So
it's not Bob from Bahamas.
Yeah, but
why you play that kid?
It's fine. Yeah, sometimes it's the Hubert Davis show, and so Roy Williams used to kind of run it, and so is Mac Brown, but it's run by Jones Angell, and it's you can learn things from it. We write it up every week, and there's a couple things that I haven't done yet that I'm gonna write off from yesterday's show because it's the last time we're gonna hear from him. So there's a little thing about the transfer portal that he said. Called it like speed dating, which I thought was an interesting quote. We probably heard that before. There's a story there about the power of the weight of the expectations that I think he said a lot, but, kind of putting a bow on that was a really big issue with this team.
Yeah. And, like Ross is saying, like, I think one of the many things that Inside Carolina, to toot our own horn, it does great is, we try to cover everything. And sometimes the Mac Brown lives, God bless him, can be tedious. And sometimes Hubert Davis live, you end up hearing the same things. But, like when we were going through the audio today, think of Ross, if you remember, like when he was, it's just wild that he talked so much about the bench, literally while those guys were getting in the portal. But, or maybe that's when the paperwork, I don't know, finally comes up. Or maybe they filed earlier in the day and then the paperwork becomes public.
I'm sure he knew they were entering, right?
You would have to think.
Yeah.
I did notice in one of Sherrell's scoops that it said McCoy had not had his end of season meeting yet. It said Nickel had, but Sherrell said Nickel had, but I don't know. I don't know if that was understood with McCoy anyway, but I thought I almost laughed to myself when Hubert started. One of his answers was, there's been some discussion about the bench minutes. Like that was his first sentence. Like, yeah, man. There's been some discussion about the bench minutes, and there really has. So, I thought that was almost. I thought there were some things. You guys go back and read what Ross. Go to InsideCarolina.com, read what Ross wrote from last night. Read what Nia Satterfield Brown wrote from last night. Because I thought there were some answers about the bench where Hubert was sort of making an admission that. He hadn't handled some things well there. And as we've heard, he's heard suggestions before from assistant coaches. Should we get Caleb out here? Should we get RJ out here? And, we've heard before him say, nah, they're good, so, I don't know. I thought there were a lot of interesting comments that came out of last night, in addition to the whole scene and the things that are happening in real time and stuff.
Oh, yeah. Shout out to Queese Peace. These are $20 for a 5-pack of readers, man. If you want to give me a sponsorship or NIL deal with some anti-reflective glasses, I'd love to have them. That is the flag that was on my namesake's coffin, and those are the OG Jordans. So, folks asking in chat. Let's get into the NIT decision, Ross, because I didn't hear a ton about that. I did listen to Bubba on Jones and Adams' podcast. I have heard the discussion that it's just best to move forward. I've said my piece on the NIT decision, but I don't have anything else to say about it than I hadn't already said. You probably could work me into talking about it again. But, Ross, what do you think?
Yeah, I do want to hear again, Tommy, from you, having a couple of days to think about it, plus what you've heard from Hubert and Bubba. I'll say what I think. I would love to hear what Adam says too. I see both sides of it. I understand where you're coming from, Tommy, where like you want this team to want to play and to compete and every chance to go out there and play and get better. I understand that. And the fact that they are kind of quitting. They're not showing up. Like I get that argument and I get that mentality that you would want them to want to play. But I also see the other side. And this is kind of where Hubert and Bubba Cunningham are coming from, and maybe some of the players that just put it into the season that there's not much to gain from a couple games in IT. If you lose in the first round or second round, there's kind of more public ridicule. There's 2 fifth-year players on the team, a senior in Baycott, 2 juniors in Caleb Love and RJ Davis who have played so much basketball. They don't need this extra time. Like they've kind of experienced it all. A couple games in the secondary tournament is probably not something that I know Caleb said he wanted to play in it, but not something that would benefit them. I do think it would have been great. This was, I think, heading into this decision. I was texting with a bunch of buddies like, I would love to see Seth Trimble, DeMarco Dunn, Dontrez Styles, Jalen Washington, Puff Johnson, like that starting lineup play. Like play the bench. And Tyler Nickel. Like I would love to see that group play. How realistic was that? I don't know. It's different. I listened to Coast to Coast. I listened to it right before the show. And I think the comparisons to 2009, 2010, it's just completely different teams,
Yep.
That 2009, 2010 team, I have the roster right in front of me. You had Ginyard on there, who was the senior, but you had a freshman in Dexter Strickland, who was, a freshman. You had a freshman in Les McDonald and a freshman in John Henson, who needed that time. They became, at least Strickland and Henson became, key parts of the next 2 years. You had the Ware twins in that team as well. So that must have been their last games. And you had a sophomore in Tyler Zeller, who didn't play much as a freshman on the championship team in 2009. And that was a very young team. And the core was pretty young. Outside of Ginyard and Deion Thompson, the core was pretty young. So they needed that time. I'm not sure how much of a benefit it would have been to play in the NIT. But I understand the perspective from a lot of people. I can see why a lot of people are upset with the decision. It's kind of it where I come from. I see both sides. I'm not really strongly on either one. Adam, and let me say this, what Hubert said and what Bubba said, moving on and getting into the transfer portal now, there's some benefits to that. They're going to have their roster set in probably a week or two and before the tournament's over. And then you have the chance to, or you can already have a chance to reach out to players in the transfer portal. So you can begin the offseason process, which if they had played the NIT, it probably wouldn't have happened for another 2-3 weeks. So they're getting a head start preparing for next season, understanding what the roster looks like, understand what they need, and then see who they can go after. And so they get a little bit of a jump start to kind of put the end of 2022, 23 and move to the next season.
Go ahead, Adam.
I have a lot of thoughts on the NIT. And to add to what Ross was saying about the 2010 team, which is a great point. They're a bunch of young guys, and they're coming off the 2009 national championship where everybody left off of that team, basically. Don't forget about 2003. They went to the NIT in 2003. That was, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that was the freshman year for Felton and Sean May and Rashad McCants. Sophomore year for Jackie Manuel. I don't know if you can look it up, Ross. They were a young team. It was Matt Doherty's last team. And it was weird with stuff that was going on with Doherty. And I looked a lot better than I did then. I believe I was 25. But I remember covering those games. They played 2 or 3 games at the Smith Center. And I believe they beat – I should have it in front of me. I had to look up the NIT stuff.
I have it right here.
They beat – here, let me see if I got it. They beat like DePaul and Wyoming, didn't they?
Yeah.
In Chapel Hill. And by the way, I'll never forget this. DePaul, this was when we used to sit, the reporters, well, some of us used to sit on the scorer's table, not in the end zones, but we were on the floor at the scorer's table. And our seats, my seats with the newspaper in Burlington, were by the visiting bench. And like if you got like Gary Williams from Maryland, obviously Coach K, it was a show from start to finish. And I had never met Dave Leitao, who became later the coach at UVA, a well-dressed guy, tall guy, very dapper. But he was the coach at DePaul then in 2003. And this dude he had the worst mouth you have ever heard in your life. I mean, he cussed everyone. Players, officials. There was a moment. I mean, I'm not like a young dude too. I'm thinking like, this is insane. Like, spit coming out of his mouth and he's got this great suit on and everything. And there was one moment where he was standing up. He's a very tall guy and he kicked the chair that he had there for him to sit in. He like kicked the back of it. He was mad about something and it flew backwards into a manager's lap. And the manager's like, oh, so they're like trying to tend to the manager and all this. But I'm getting off topic. That was but what I'm trying to say is that 2003 was beneficial, just like 2010, I think was beneficial for those young guys. And just, like Ross said, this is a team that, RJ Davis and Caleb Love aren't even the oldest members on the team, and they've played 101 games together. I mean, the core four with Armando, Aliki, RJ, and Caleb, they've played 1 million games together. I don't know. I understand, and I do feel like it's a quitter's mentality. I think that's where you come down on it, Tommy. And I understand that by backing out of the NIT, you're just getting killed in the court of public opinion. With that said, you go to the NIT. If you lose, you're going to get killed in the court of public opinion. I still remember Kentucky going to the NIT years ago and losing to Robert Morris And that might have led SportsCenter because it was like the greatest win in Robert Morris basketball history. So you're kind of with this group in this moment after a season like this, my God, you're kind of in a no-win situation. Unless you were going to play all the guys on the bench, which dang well Hubert wouldn't have done that. He'd be rolling the same tired-ass dudes out there. I mean, that's yet another angle to this is I feel like these guys are exhausted. I could be wrong about that, but I feel like all of these games that have come down to a couple possessions in the second half, I just feel like they are tight. Think about all the games they played last year, the stories of how tired they were by the time the Final Four and championship game happened. And then all this stuff they've been going through this year with, number one to start the season, yada, yada, yada. I just think in some ways they're exhausted. But I'd be interested to hear who wanted to play and who didn't. Certainly it sounds like Hubert and Bubba did not want to play and didn't think it would be productive.
If you look at the USA Today article where
Right.
the parents chimed in, I'm not sure I like that look, but maybe it's beneficial in some way. But they would have been playing on Tuesday night in the NCAA play-in game like tonight. Rutgers just lost in the NIT. But, I mean, would they have been tired and exhausted and all that stuff if Greg Gumbel and Jay Wright would have said their names in the NCAA tournament? I mean, I don't buy that.
Tommy. That's a good point.
Here's what this is a different take than I had the other night, Ross. One, I still think it was a bad decision to take off. But by declining the bid and giving younger guys an opportunity to play in meaningful games, however we think about meaningful, however the team thinks about meaningful, competition is always meaningful. You basically said, we don't need you to do that. You basically told a guy like Tyler Nickel, go home, leave. We're not going to play. You're not going to play anyway. That was an opportunity to give the bench, and that's what they did in 03, 02, 03, and they did in 9 and 10, and it was beneficial down the road. Well, Hubert Davis has shown in 2 years that the bench doesn't really matter for him. Maybe it does next year. But the way he's going and the way he's shown, and then this decision that shows the bench players that they don't deserve to get some meaningful minutes. Baycott could have sat out. RJ Davis could have sat out. They're injured. I'll give them that. Caleb Love could have done whatever he wanted to do. But by not going, you say these bench guys that need valuable moments on the court, we don't need them. I'm going to play 6 guys, 7 guys tops. I'm going to go to the portal. I'm going to get 3 or 4 guys in the portal that are going to come start. And Tyler Nickel, sorry, bud, And you got to know that played in his role. Everybody says he was not patient. He's the 90th ranked guy or whatever. I mean, he had to hear that or see that I'm not going to play unless I start. And that's the problem, because at some point you're going to need those guys. At some point you've got to build a program, and that program includes dudes down the bench that know their role. And Ross, that's where I'm at on the whole thing. Now that I said I wasn't going to say anything and I'm saying something, is that if you don't build if people don't know their role, what point do they have to play? Last time I checked, the last team I remember that played 6 deep is 1982 National Championship team. And they had some pretty good players on there. But if you remember, in the National Championship game, Chris Brust hit a free throw that won them the game ultimately because they won by 1 point. You got to have these guys, and that's just another reason why you don't turn it down. And they would have played today or Wednesday, whether they were in the NIT or the NCAA tournament. So all this jump ahead mess, and Ross, I'll give you this. I will take it all back if they have a roster set with who's gone and who's staying and who's in the portal by this weekend. Because otherwise that argument doesn't fly at all, because we all know that back channel stuff. I mean, the kid transferred from Notre Dame. He went to portal one day and he was committed to Syracuse the second day. That's how it works. It doesn't work by just not talking. Anyway, off my soapbox. What do you think, Ross?
Yeah, I mean, look, if they could have played the freshmen and the sophomores and like Puff more, like that would have been, I would have loved to have watched that. That would have made total sense. But like Adam said, I don't think that would have happened.
No, I agree with that. I
So I
totally
mean,
agree with
I would have
that.
loved to see, just throw out Nickel for 35 minutes, see what he could do. Throw out Jalen Washington and put Trimble at point guard and just see how that team looks. And my mic's kind of off, so I don't know if y'all hear
No,
me.
we could hear you.
But
We could hear you.
I mean, that'd been great, but it's not happened. It just didn't. It didn't happen, and we're kind of talking in the past now. But that's a situation where I would have really appreciated to see them in the NIT. But I also get the sense, like Adam said, like this team was tired. Like Baycott was checked out. I mean, he clearly didn't want to play. And he hadn't played that great and been hobbled for a couple games now. And it seemed like maybe going back to NC State at home. I'm not sure. He had kind of started off as this kind of first team All-American type year. And then it slowly declined in the second half of the ACC play. RJ was banged up a lot too, but it just seemed there's a sense of
finality is the word, Ross.
Season was done. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if these guys really wanted to play. Sure, I'm sure like guys wanted to play like Nickel just to go out and just play some more time to get minutes, but I think there was a sense of just ending the season. And I get the point, like. UNC compete for ACC and national championships, not NIT championships too. But that's
just to take us back real quick, sort of talking about the finality. I was thinking about that as you were talking, Tommy, and as Ross was talking. And also, Ross is right. I mean, I love Armando in terms of being a reporter and covering the guy. He is great to cover. But, I mean, he had a very underwhelming final 10, 12 games of the season. As I've told Ross, Ross and I sit there watch the games. I tell him all this stuff repeatedly because I just kind of just start running my mouth like a nerd during the games. Armando didn't have a 20-point game, has not had a 20-point game since January 21st, the NC State game at home. That's the last time he scored 20 points in a game.
Yeah. Okay.
This guy made third team All-American today by the AP. God bless him on his reputation. And maybe it's also like a lifetime achievement award too before becoming UNC's all-time leading rebounder. He was not a third-team All-American this season.
Well, he did average 16 and 11, and he was worn out.
I know it. I'm talking about being an All-American based on how you played. I think he was great last. I mean, he had a historic season last year. But I'm just saying in terms of this year, and just to go back very quickly to the game where they lost to UVA at the Greensboro Coliseum in the ACC tournament, I think Ross would agree. You go into the locker room, you could just feel it. Like Caleb did say, yes, I want to play. And I believed him. I don't think he lied to me. I asked RJ, he goes, I'm a hooper. That's what I do. When I asked him about the NIT. That was in a hallway, actually. I was trying to catch up to him. But you just could feel, it felt like a morgue. You could feel the doneness. I don't think that's a word, but the finality was there. You could feel it after the Duke game when they lost. I could feel it from Armando after the Duke game that like, well, we're down to our last bullet. I think, there was finality and I think there was some dread there too. Heck, Leaky and Armando, I'm assuming you guys read this from our story. They went on a daggum walk after the UVA game in the ACC tournament. They just left. It took a walk and sort of, according to Leaky and Armando, reminisced and talked about the good times. And then, our excellent communications director for UNC, Steve Kirshner, I think, went and got him and said, come back and, talk to these goofballs, meaning us, the reporters. But
yeah. I mean, Puff Johnson, I can say that's some sense when Adam's like going on and on. So I try to put a little. It's great stuff. I try to cut him off so he can.
I need to be cut off.
No, it's good. It's good. Puff Johnson was like either wiping tears or blood. I wrote that in my lead. Like he just couldn't. Maybe he had something in his eye, but he was beat up.
He looked distraught to me.
He did.
Yeah, it was a weird time to catch him with the video there.
I'm glad you got the video.
Yeah. It was just, and the Duke, I'm trying to think back to the post Duke media scene, but this they knew where they stood. Like they knew that they had to win that NC State game. That was gonna be big. They knew that Duke game was really important. They kind of gave it up in the closing minutes there. Like you could kind of see this ship, slowly going downhill. Like they had to, like the fact that they had to win out in the ACC tournament, and that we were talking about that to Hubert and the players, kind of gave you a sense of where the season was going. Had some other stuff to say, but I forgot. But yeah,
I will tell this, and this is our crowd, and Ross, you can jump back in, but this is the On the Beat tonight. Ross, Adam, and myself. Spring break, so Dewey's not with us. And Greg Barnes said his piece in the column that many of you have either loved or there's a couple of you that have hated. But I tell you one thing, to say that Greg doesn't know what he's talking about and doesn't know the lay of the land might be one of the silliest things I've read on the message boards. That dude's as connected as anybody, period. Anyway, now I lost my train of thought.
You're defending Greg.
No, that was before that.
You just did that.
Anyway.
Well, let me
go ahead.
Let me say this, Tom. I want to talk about Bacot. It just, the fact that he was worn down and that he had to play so many minutes just shows the lack of they haven't developed a backup big man. Like Jalen Washington wasn't ready. They got to get back to, got to have 3 serviceable big men in there that can relieve a guy like Bacot. So the big men were Pete Nance, Armando Bacot, and Jalen Washington. And I guess the transition to this, small man forward, kind of having 4 wings out there and a big man. I guess that's why they're not recruiting as many big men. But you needed someone during the season to come in and relieve Bacot so he wasn't pressured so much to play so much and to deliver. I guess that's the Roy Williams lineup when you're constantly recruiting 2 bigs a year and you're at least 1 a year. It just seems like they have lacked that depth down low for Bacot over the last 2 seasons, and that's just back to developing bench and where they prioritize in recruiting and development of players.
And Slagle's right. I saw Slagle's comments in the chat. You're right. Armando was hurt, and he was hurt early on this season, and he's such a tough guy. I don't mean to bash Armando.
We love Armando.
I don't mean to make it sound like I'm bashing Armando. I just meant from a production standpoint. And you're right. I mean, he was hurt all season. He played through the pain. He's probably there's probably several games he played that he should not have been playing, and including that final game against UVA. I mean, the guy, when he went down against BC, it was kind of like, they were rolling against BC, but it was kind of like, man, you're going to need that dude if you're trying to make a deep run here. But to Slagle's point in the chat, that should be said. The guy played through sprained ankles, a bruised shoulder, and that impacted, I just felt like by the end, he didn't have any lift down there, like he just could not get off the floor. The feet were very heavy. I felt like seeing, going all around places and seeing him at FSU and Notre Dame. I just felt like those feet were heavy from Armando, and, you could see the toll on him. Go ahead, Tommy. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, I was going to take a second to talk about Johnny T-shirt, but I wanted to address a comment in the chat, and it's from Jeff, not Jeff Vance, but just Jeff. Said I bashed the listeners when I'm talking about Greg Barnes. I'm talking about the attacks on Greg Barnes on our message boards, not our listeners. We love our listeners, and I love all comments. Feel free to give as many as you want. But when people attack somebody like Greg personally, or Ross or Adam, or any of us for reporting and covering the team, and it's something you don't like to hear, I personally have a problem with that. So if you take that as me bashing listeners, that is not the what you call it. Anyway,
we got some feisty commenters today.
I know.
I've noticed a lot of stuff back and forth. I mean, we got some funny stuff in there too, but we've got a lot more. Yeah, I mean, I love it too. A lot more.
It's appropriate, isn't it? Like, hey, real quick, Ross was laying out who the big men were on that team: Armando, Pete Nance, and Jalen Washington, which obviously is correct. When the last time Jalen Washington scored a point?
That's what I was going to talk about earlier. Tell me.
The Clemson game 8 games ago. He hadn't scored a point since February 11th. Now, I'm not putting that on Jalen Washington. They don't play him.
Yeah.
He's got zeros and DMPs. I'm looking at it right here in my game notes. Zeros and DMPs since they blew out Clemson.
And look,
I think he took 2 shots the final 8 games of the season. And I mean, this is a guy you're trying to build around. Like, I just really quickly, Hubert's talking a good game again about developing a bench. Like, I don't know what Hubert thinks if you play a guy 90 seconds, he's using the bench. You're not using your bench. You play a guy a minute and 20 seconds. Like, what kind of mess is like? That's unbelievable.
You gotta get comfortable. You gotta get comfortable. You gotta be out there for
you gotta play
4 or 5 minutes to get comfortable in the game.
We've talked about it ad nauseum. There's only 3 teams in the country use their bench less than UNC per KenPom. 3.
And there's 363.
There you go. Granted, one of them is Kansas. So, there's one number 1 seeds, and then I think the others are Ryder and Marist or Marshall. Ryder and Marshall. I can't remember.
And
let me talk about. Hold on. Let me do Johnny T-shirt. This is getting good.
Sorry about that, guys.
No, it's just 9:30-ish, 9:36. I think there's over 1,000 people in here. That's ridiculous. You guys are awesome. Tell your friends, tell your family, get on in here. Somebody asked where the premium chat is. Well, it's on Inside Carolina Premium message board, and you can get in that premium chat by joining Inside Carolina. And you know what you get? You get 10% off your everyday Johnny T-shirt order if you're an Inside Carolina Premium subscriber. You get all the Rail Scoop, you get all the Don Scoop, you get everything you need Inside Carolina Premium. This is the time to have it, right? It never stops. There is no off season. You can hear Ross, Adam, and I talk here, but we're not going to share the Premium Scoop. That's on the boards. We'll give you some hints, and we'll talk about it as it comes apparent, but on the boards and on Inside Carolina. And Johnny T-shirt gives you everything you need. You know what you can do? You can support Carolina baseball by going to Johnny T-shirt and buying all those jerseys, all the women's teams, even basketball and football, whatever you need for Johnny T-shirt. National Guys Pay the Bills on the beat live, 9:37 on the East Coast. We'll be right back with Ross, Adam, and this guy. All right, on the beat live, back again, Ross and Adam. Adam, I cut you off. Or maybe I cut you off, Ross. I get on a rant and I forget. Carolina not playing. Their game's going on tonight. The first 4 games. There's 1,000 people in our chat. Who says Carolina basketball isn't relevant? Ross, it's always going to be relevant.
Yeah. I'll say something about that. I mean, I'm sitting on a tweet. I'm saying second half of On the Beat Live starting now. Discussion is flowing. One commenter called it the Adam Smith show.
Join here. I missed that.
Yeah.
I will Scott Holland, ask a question so I can tag it. Please hurry up and ask a question so I don't miss it again.
I just tweeted out. I will say this. Yeah. I mean, would you say over 1,000 people in this chat, in this video? Man, the UNC, being on Twitter, I mean, I'm very on Twitter. I'm on there a lot. And the passion of the UNC fan base, I mean, it's up there. It's got to be top 3, I would think, with Kentucky and Kansas in terms of basketball. It is just unbelievable. You want to elicit, either love, I think, or like deep emotions, deep passion. You don't want to be boring. And, people hate and get very passionate about UNC basketball and everything that's going on. And when they're disappointing like this season, and then you see it when they're killing it. It's a very positive emotion. So you see how big and powerful and popular UNC basketball is in moments like this, because I think you would rather have this kind of emotion than apathy, And so, I mean, that's why Inside Carolina is very, very big. I see the numbers. I see the numbers from 24/7 Sports about revenue and subscriptions and all that. And much of that is because of how passionate the fan base is and how successful UNC basketball has been, and UNC football. There's definitely a passionate side of that. So that's just one thing. On bench play here, Adam, another thing is like UNC should always have a good, strong bench because they should be recruiting so high. Like you would expect them to be playing their bench because of how well they recruit. Obviously, I think recruiting has been down a little bit, kind of at the tail end of the Roy Williams era there. But teams like UNC should be teams that use their bench a lot because they have 4 and 5 stars on the bench waiting to get in. Seth Trimble, Jalen Washington, Dontrez Styles, Puff Johnson, all those guys were 4 or 5 stars. And so teams that have that depth of talent are the ones that we should be using it. That's why it's just odd that you haven't developed it. And so when they needed them, they weren't ready. But I don't know if it's time to move on from that topic, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, the 2024 recruiting class is super strong. The 23 class is decent. The portal class will be interesting, but the deal is that if you don't start, you're not going to play, and that's what's been shown. So I think that's number one that needs to be corrected for next year. But Adam, get in here, move us forward a little bit. I mean,
I think you're talking about the 2024 class being, super, and the 2023 class. I think this year's portal class is going to have to be very good, or it's going to have to be what Carolina needs. I mean, I don't know. Ross was saying earlier that they could have their roster done here in a couple of weeks. I mean, they certainly could. I don't know. Do you want to wait until the NCAA tournament is over? Is that too long? Because you're waiting until I don't know. I'm saying,
well,
you're waiting until April, but then you could have some guys that are playing in the Final Four, Elite Eight that want to move on.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not
sure. Kind of a weird little dance here, I feel like.
Well, let's just go through it here. Let's go through UNC's roster. Because I think, this conversation will be stale in a couple days, maybe when another player leaves. But, right now, Justin McCoy and Tyler Nickel are gone. I think, I don't want to give out too much premium info, but I think the general consensus is that Caleb Love is gonna not be on the team next year either. And then so the questions come to Dontrez Styles, DeMarco Dunn, who am I missing? Puff Johnson.
Armando Bacot.
Yeah. So those three I just said: Puff Johnson, DeMarco Dunn, Dontrez Styles. I think those are the guys that you're kind of waiting to hear from. Now, this is just me thinking. I think based on what Dontrez Styles said in that interview today on a Kinston radio show, there's an article up. I don't think it's on the front page, but it's on the boards. And it was all the boards today. I mean, it seems like he is going to be leaving and transferring. Dontrez Styles, former 4-star guy from Kinston. I mean, he hasn't played at all, and I have no problem with him transferring. If he wants to play, and obviously he wants to play, go someplace and play, because Hubert is not playing him. So then you're waiting for DeMarco Dunn to make a decision and Puff Johnson. Then I think general consensus is that RJ Davis could come back, and there's a good chance he will come back. I don't see why they want it. And then Armando Bacot has a 5th year too. And so who are we missing there? The freshman. Jalen Washington.
Seth Trimble's there, and Jalen Washington.
And I think I don't know. I don't know too much about them. And look, a lot of this stuff's on the premium board, so I don't want to give out too much information. But I think there's general good momentum on those guys coming back as well. So now you're looking at a team that needs to. The big question is Dunn, Johnson, Styles, and then what happens with the 2 freshmen, and then getting word from Bacot and Davis. So you're looking at replacing a significant amount of production. And I think this team needs to go out. I mean, you talk about this on Coast to Coast, Tommy. Sean said it, they need to get some wing scores. They probably need get another guard, and a big man. I mean, they need to load up on some guys. It matters, the balancing act of who, how many people they need and what positions. Of course, you're adding a guard in Simeon Wilcher and a stretch 4 in Zayden High. So somebody can do the math there, but you're gonna have to replace. They need shooting and scoring, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah, without a doubt. They need some wing. They need some basketball players on the wing that can fill it up. I mean, how many games did we see this season? This is one of the worst shooting teams in Carolina basketball history. They're one of the worst shooting teams in the country from 3-point range. It's kind of amazing they averaged I think they were 4th in the ACC in scoring. It's kind of unbelievable they were able to score that many points. Which speaks to Armando getting fouled down low, and when Caleb and RJ are able to get those driving lanes and get to the basket and get fouled. But they how many games were they starving for shooting? If they had one more shot go in a couple of these games, Ross is right. We'd be going to cover them somewhere this weekend. Just one more shot against Pitt, both games. Just one more shot. They're probably in. One more shot against Alabama.
Yep.
One more stop. They're in. So, yeah, I think now who knows what the portal has and doesn't have. If you could find Brady Manick, sure, absolutely. But I feel like they need some guys on the wing, a 6'5", 6'6", 6'7", 6'8" guy that can just score and go get a bucket. Because honestly, I know it's not sexy to talk about. It was a pretty good defensive team. They did have their lapses. Caleb absolutely had his defensive lapses, and sometimes Pete Nance couldn't move. But Pete, I felt like a good rim protector by the end when he got healthy again. But this group has been good defensively.
Man, we've said on the podcast, and Adam and I sit next to each other during the games. I mean, as good as Leaky Black has been as a defender and kind of a multi-tool guy, I mean, he hits more threes this year than probably we expected, but he is just not a knockdown shooter. And he is your 3. And he's your 3 for 3 seasons. And that is this position, the 3 and the 2. They're the ones that we should be filling it up from deep. And you had Nance. Nance was not a consistent 3-point shooter. He had a flurry against Portland and a flurry against Virginia. And outside of that, it was 1 or 2 per game. And then that big drought. And then Puff, I mean, all due respect, he was awful shooting the second half of the ACC play.
No one's more chaotic than Puff Johnson. Go ahead.
And look, and I like him kind of as a tweener there. He's aggressive. He's a good, he always seems to find the ball, offensive rebounds, and can score kind of in the paint a little bit. He's crafty. I mean, I think it would be great to have him back because I think he can bring a lot and fill a lot of holes for UNC. But when Nance is your 4, and in this offense, the 4 guy needs to shoot because he gets those corner threes. And same with Leaky Black, the 3 guy gets those corner threes. And when those 2 guys are not good, that's why the 3-point shooting suffered. So, yeah, go out and get some shooters. They probably need to get potentially like another kind of ball handler if they're losing Love, I'd imagine. They have Trimble and Simeon Wilcher if Trimble decides to come back. And then, maybe two or 3 shooters and scorers, and then probably another big man, another kind of stretch forward, I would imagine, if they're losing Nance, potentially losing like a Styles or a Johnson. This is stuff I'm saying this potentially because we don't know on a lot of these guys. So, 3 or 4 transfers. And then, I don't know the timetable on that. And I'll reference this, guys. Ben Sherman just posted kind of a mini scoop on the boards. And look, these scoops are coming in daily. So this is the time to subscribe. Sherelle's scoop on Sunday.
Yes.
It was unbelievable. And it was worth, it's worth a month's subscription. That was so much intel. I sold a workout member a subscription that morning on Monday morning. I went and got an annual subscription because he's been a huge UNC fan and he's a big UNC football fan. I sold him on that. So guys, if you're not subscribing, tell your friends, tell your family. I mean, this is the time because this is stuff. There's information on Inside Carolina right now that no one else has. And with Sherelle and Ben and the insiders there and Greg. So this is the time to subscribe. Like the free stories that Adam and I do, like, that's free. But the premium recruiting, transfer, meetings, inside the building type stuff, now it's time to subscribe. So everybody go check out the scoop that was posted just minutes ago. Tommy?
Yeah, and don't share it in the chat because it'll get you a quick boot. It's just how it is. It's the nature of the beast. I agree with everything Ross said. What I was going to say, and I remember what I said. Y'all were talking about how Adam, you were talking about Baycott hadn't been himself the last few weeks. He was dead tired. He was worn out and hurt. And injuries and all of that stuff come from playing too much. And these guys played far more than they should have for the last 2 years. So I totally agree that he was not himself. But, I mean, it would help to have somebody like Jalen Washington playing, even if it's just 10 minutes a game, that helps a ton. And so that's where I think Hubert Davis needs to get to, regardless of who comes back. I mean, everybody can say they love to play 30, 35, 40 minutes a game, but let's be realistic. Most people are not functional at the highest level when they are tired. And if you're playing 35 to 45 minutes a game or 40 minutes a game, it's just not going to happen. And so number one for me off season, regardless of who's on the roster, is the bench has to do something other than, watching. And I remember what Chiswick said, and Ross, you were there, and Adam, you were there too. Gene Chiswick said, if you don't produce, you will be watching. Well, at some point, you got to be given a chance to produce, and I don't think they were the past 2 years. Anyway, anything left, boys? We've talked a lot. It's 9:50. We usually go an hour. Yes, there's a premium scoop by Ben Sherman on the UNC basketball premium message boards if folks want to check it out. What do we think about, and I'll ask this, and this might be a trick question or a rabbit hole. Ross, what do you think about Hubert rarely owning it? I'm serious. I mean, Chiswick owned it. Chizik owned that they sucked last year. I haven't heard Hubert say it's on me to fix it or it's my fault or whatever. I've just never heard that, and that's a little confusing to me coming from a Carolina coach, given what we're used to.
Well, Tommy, how did you like, real quick, Ross, give you more time to think about that one. Tommy, how did you like Hubert's response after they lost to UVA when he was asked, how would you make your case to the NCAA tournament committee? And he didn't have an answer really for a while. He eventually said some things, but it was not, I've seen a lot more convincing answers from people before. He was not jumping up on the table. Obviously, I wrote that it was not Seth Greenberg saying you'd be clinically insane or certifiably insane if they weren't in. Anyway, go ahead, Ross. Tommy, I didn't know how that one set with you. I'm sure it didn't sit too well.
No, and I mean, I heard Jerry Stackhouse give his thing. I mean, Jerry Stackhouse ticked off all of their responsibilities. And Miss Jones in the chat, if you'll be glad to link me what you're talking about, I'll be glad to listen to it, watch it, and take it back. Go ahead, Ross.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Hubert Davis media, quotes to the public is it's a complex and confusing world to delve into. I mean, he is super positive. He's not going to throw players underneath the bus. I don't know if what he says, if he believes everything he says, or if it's a kind of spinning it, or if he's living in some dream world and not reality, because he says stuff that's just not accurate. And it's not real sometimes. You're like, what is he talking about? And I think he does live in a very optimistic, positive. That's just how he coaches and how he treats his players and how he wants the program to be perceived. And that's great. I mean, that's great. That can be very helpful for young players. And he's definitely not a negative guy. But yeah, I don't know, Tom, if he's ever said much about self-reflection and self-scouting and getting better as a coach. I think it's important to realize this is his second year as a coach, as a head coach. He's never been a head coach outside of the JV team. And there's some in-game decisions and how to monitor minutes that he hasn't had experience with before. Like he always says that as an assistant, you make suggestions. As a head coach, you make decisions. And so, it's probably been a learning curve for him. And I think we have been skewed by the last 6 weeks of 2021-22 season where they went on that run. They beat Duke twice and went to the national championship game. I think that the view of him and this team kind of skewed what we thought of Hubert Davis, when the reality is they've been pretty mediocre in the ACC. And now they had made they didn't make the NCAA tournament in year 2. And they've been mediocre, maybe a little bit above mediocre in conference, and out of conference, probably 50-50 as well. They've lost a lot of games out of conference as well. So, I think he needs to – there's probably a lot of things he knows he needs to get better as well. And some of that's roster management and bench minutes and in-game coaching. But also it's just so interesting to break down how he talks to the media. Adam, I'm sure you have a lot to say on that.
Tommy, did you want to get one in?
Yeah, let me read this. This is from Hubert Davis in his radio show. This is owning what you say. And I said earlier that he didn't ever own it. Well, I'm changing that opinion a little bit. I think this year, one of the things that was difficult at times, I'm not saying I got it right all the time, was the little injuries that we had throughout the season. Rotation. Sometimes I got it wrong. Most of the time, or sometimes I got it right. That's something I'm continuing to learn as a second-year head coach. That is growth. And that is what we need to see more of. And so on when was that radio show? Yesterday. So on March the 13th, Hubert Davis said those things. Go ahead, Adam.
No, keep going, Tommy, if you want to.
Let me say this. Hubert's not an idiot. And so, he probably is very aware of the issues. He is not dumb. So, I think he knows. So what he says publicly is probably different than what he thinks internally. Adam?
Hubert has said it. He is not going to call you out. He's going to call you up. That's one of his favorite things. He likes to say, Monty Williams, coach of the Phoenix Suns, the former NBA and Notre Dame player. He loves to quote Monty Williams on that. I'm not going to call you out. I'm not going to call you out. I'm going to call you up. He's not going to go negative. At least he hasn't in his first, how many games has he coached? 60, 70? 75, something like that. He's just not going to do it. The closest Hubert has ever come to just losing it, I think, and letting UNC have it publicly was after the Wake Forest game where he kept them in the locker room so long. But then he came out and, he was so muted and he barely said anything, I think, because he was trying to choose his words so carefully. But he's just not going to go negative. And when you have some of these crash and burn games and performances, I can understand where it gets, you want to pull your hair out when you hear him being positive after something that felt so negative. But people, nerdy sports writers like us love to say things like coach is finding his voice. I just don't know if Hubert has found his voice yet in terms of his messaging to the public. I think I don't dislike covering him at all. I think he usually gives you stuff to write about and stuff for us to record and talk about. But, there's a lot of variance there. So, yeah, Hubert, the other day, not too long ago, we were there on a Friday, Ross, and you remember he called himself a first-year, second-year head coach, meaning, I'm learning here. And, yeah, I really do think that – and obviously, Roy Williams coached for, 18 years? People got used to Roy's style of how he was. Fiery Roy. Roy would be pissed, and Hubert, his personality-wise – is just completely different than that. And when the bumps in the road have come, sometimes it's hard to wonder why Hubert is saying some of these things that he's saying. But again, he's just not going to go negative, at least not right now. He's going to go extremely positive.
And when Roy came to Carolina, he had coached 15 years as a head coach at Kansas, right? And then 10 years as an assistant under Dean. So he had 15 years head coach experience when he arrived in 2003.
Yep. I think it's 100% accurate that everybody needs to grow from it. Hubert will certainly grow from it. The Carolina basketball program needs to grow. It's going to be interesting over the next few days to see what the roster looks like. Stay tuned to Ross Martin, Adam Smith, and Sherelle McMillan, and Ben Sherman, and everybody at InsideCarolina.com, especially on the premium side. We will come back with any emergency podcast we need to have over the next few days.
I was just going to ask, Tommy, what do you think would require a emergency pod?
Probably decisions from the big three.
Caleb, RJ, and Armando.
Yeah, we'll get emergency pods. We'll see though. We'll just see what happens. I would think I think they qualify.
I'm not on Instagram. I'm an older gentleman. But I was told that Armando was on Instagram recently on a yacht.
Yeah.
On spring break. Is that correct? Ross, you're younger and hipper.
It looks like South Florida's the place to be
for
you in UNC. To paraphrase Woody Durham's Granville Towers show.
I mean, Baycott has hundreds of thousands of dollars from deals with Crocs and Rowback and a horse breeding farm. And Outer Banks appearances. So, I mean,
money. It's all about the money.
It's who to get on a yacht.
Not quite a boomer yet, my man Colin in the chat. Not quite.
It is.
Might as well be.
It is. It'll be interesting to watch over the next couple of weeks.
Comment there.
Well, I had nice Sherelle live from South Beach with the scoop. Bring it to a Sherelle. Anyway, Inside Carolina's on the beat live. It's been nice. It's always great to have differing opinions in the chat. It's always fun. There's no hate here. It's all love. All love going around to everybody. Shout out to Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com. Shout out to Ross and Adam for busting their butts covering this stuff. We'll be back on Inside Carolina Live on Saturday. Maybe some special guests on there. We might hear from some former players, see what they had to say about what's going on in Chapel Hill. Appreciate it. Everyone be safe.